All right, Mark from New York,
Hello?
the God of the Gaps fallacy is what you wanted to talk about. It says you'd like to eliminate it from your thinking. Do you want to elaborate on
Yeah,
maybe something specific there?
yes, exactly. This comes up a lot because um, a lot of the arguments are, I think, abductive arguments for God's existence, and they kind of work, I think, in the same type of fashion that um, the way scientific theories are developed, which is there's an observation, and then there's a hypothesis, and there's an inference to, there's basically an inference to the best explanation, which looks at competing hypotheses. And this then, what comes up when you discuss these arguments is the objections a lot of times are like, well, you're just raising a God of the gaps fallacy. And it's tough to actually, I'm very cognizant of that, and I don't want to fall down that trap. Like, I don't want to make a God at the gaps argument because I don't think that's really a valid argument.
Sure.
So,
Well, I have a
you know,
solution
so,
on one way to separate, given what you said about science. One way to separate that, novel predictions. Do you know what novel predictions are?
sure.
Yeah, the new something new we predict, we find in the future. Like we say there's some, maybe there's some maybe Pangea is true. We unify some theories of science, and we look at the eastern coast of eastern coast of South America and the western coast of Africa. We look at the geological column. We say, my hypothesis, something crude, is we'll find the same species in some layer in the geological column. We go look, we find it. Right, novel prediction confirmed, unifies other theories, archaeology, maybe geology, unifies more than just evolutionary biology. Really, really good evidence, and it's going to be hard to claim like a God of gaps or a naturalism of the gaps or a science of the gaps, as some people want to say, because it's actually doing something and having predictive success, generating prediction. Would you agree with that? If you had that, you can knock out the God of the gaps thing. You can just have some novel prediction, and you're not making it up, right? You've actually generated a predictive outcome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do agree with that. I'm trying to connect that element that you just mentioned to the broader issue. So maybe if I can give a couple examples to illustrate what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The initial way I was thinking of describing it was there's one move that sometimes theists make that I think is almost like the opposite of the God of the gaps, which is, are you familiar with like the term theistic evolution?
Well, like
At all?
intelligent design.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's a variation on intelligent design where it's a version of intelligent design where it's kind of saying like there's kind of different versions of theistic evolution, but like one of the variations is that that evolution is an unguided, undirected process, sort of like at the level that we observe it, but God is really pulling the strings from above. Like he's really orchestrating.
Oh, that has an immediate issue off the bat. Like off the bat, if it's explained already by the unguided processes, then what is the explanatory role of adding intentional states? That right? What is that doing? Because you can just shave off the God part if you have a full explanation of the phenomena, right? It's like the marble thing I said to someone in the other call, which is that all we're doing is saying, oh, it's two marbles that knocked it off, but we have complete evidence that it was only one marble that knocked it off, right? It's just we're arbitrarily adding some extra thing, and
Exactly.
it's not ontologically like economical, right? Because why not two gods? Why not three gods? Right? Why not a god wearing a little hat juggling some balls? Right? Why? Like, so that's going to be an issue there immediately for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, and even from like a theistic perspective, it's like kind of like, I mean, there's the same kind of problems arise. Like it's just like it's not a very coherent viewpoint, but it kind of insulates the theist from falsification and kind of insulates their worldview, because they could just say, like, sure, there's evolution, but God is really orchestrating the evolution.
But I can just do that with any phenomena, you know, like I can, like, what, you know, like anything I could pick out in the world. All I have to do is just say, well, there's some entity that desires the outcome, has the ability to produce the outcome, and doesn't have reasons not to produce the outcome. And then boom, you can explain anything with that. But that's just like a just so story. It's not, you're not predicting, right? You're not making like the thing that would be, essentially that view is divorced from the thing that I was saying earlier, like novel predictions, which sounds like, I mean, I'm not saying this towards you because this isn't your view, but if you're trying to, as the call screener says, trying to eliminate God of the gaps, it says you're a theist, right? Yeah. So if you're trying to eliminate that, I mean, that's one way I'd offer it. To me, it always seems very clear that this is just some way to create a story. You can create stories all day long. The difference between a story and something that's going to be viable is, in my opinion, novel predictions. That's how you can convert. It constrains your reasoning. Whereas the other one, there's no constraint. I can interpret anything so long as I have this hypothesis in the background that there's an entity that desires the outcome, has the ability for the outcome, and doesn't have reasons not to produce the outcome. Then I'm solved every issue I could ever want. But I'm missing a crucial thing, which is being able to falsify it, or being able to verify it, or being able to produce a predictive outcome, because everything is predicted on that hypothesis. Every single thing is predicted on that hypothesis.
Right. No, absolutely. So for example, I mean, I kind of like your point about the predictions, but like even using that as an example, like in the intelligent design field, Stephen Meyer, who is an intelligent design proponent, he's written like a few books on the topic, Signature in the Cell, Darwin's Doubt, and he includes, I think, in Signature in the Cell, a list of predictions that he thinks flow from his view of intelligent design. And he thinks some of them have been validated, like that there would be, that we would find, like, I think the term he uses, like junk DNA. And so
I don't know how that would be predictive on the hypothesis, though, because it seems that the hypothesis can explain any data. It could explain a world with just marbles, right? A God with, all you have to do is have an entity that desires such an outcome. So whatever you have in there, that's why I'm saying it. This view doesn't even seem like you could produce novel predictions. It seems like it's divorced. It seems like it's shutting itself off from such an event, because it can explain any type of outcome. Whatever world we find ourselves in, you could use this hypothesis as a just so story, it seems like. But I don't know, Jim, if you want to. Or no, go ahead. I'm sorry. If anybody, whoever, one of you guys.
I think for looking at the falsifiability issue, how do you falsify the claim that however evolution works, God is behind the scenes, pulling strings? How do you falsify that? And you can't. In fact, not only can't you falsify it, how would you even create a hypothesis, a testable hypothesis, right? What are your independent and dependent variables that you have to state in your hypothesis for it to be considered a good scientific hypothesis? How would you go about testing it, much less falsifiability? And you can't test that, right? We don't have a test for God or the supernatural. And then to go to the predictability, God did it. Okay, so what does that mean? If we know how storms form, that gives us a lot of predictability. Now we can actually forecast storms. We can forecast hurricanes and tornadoes. We can do all this stuff. But if we stop with, what causes weather phenomena, God, now what do we predict? So I don't know, we can't predict anything at that point, right? We can't predict storms because God did it. It stops everything with that explanation, and it's unfalsifiable. So I don't know what it, Jmike mentioned earlier, I don't know what it brings to the table. It doesn't seem to bring anything to the table that's useful for scientific inquiry or for improving life here on Earth.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, and I wanted to mention that because I think that's like kind of to the furthest end of the spectrum. But then you have other intelligent design proponents who don't take that line. And so, like the example I mentioned earlier with Stephen Meyer, like he's not taking that line in signature in the cell. And basically what he does is critiques the evolutionary theory, and I guess within that process, because I agree with you, I actually haven't read those books, but I just know from listening to him, following like some of his debates, that he does make predictions in signature in the cell about certain things that we might expect to find.
Yeah, but doesn't the hypothesis? So this is the problem I have with it. Real quick, is that I want to look at this because I'm always happy to see a theist, at least attempt some novel predictions, and like that's great. At least we're getting somewhere and not doing like the big circle. The problem I have though is the problem that I have or that I see is that there's going to be so much baked in there. God's a loving God. He desires to create. I mean, look at like the fine tuning, for example, right? We have like just to show the parallel. Okay, all the parameters could be one way. It happens to be some way, and then we explain it. God has these desires that can, that's why, right? He has this desire. We bake this in, but we don't realize that we're singling out a desire that he has, which it could be anything, a desire for just rocks in the universe, a desire for no life. We just somehow single out this desire like it's explaining anything, when in fact, it seems like God's desires in this case are going to be fine-tuned, right? It seems like we're having this weird notion of why is God's desire so privileged? Point I'm trying to say is that we're motivating and baking in a lot of these things that haven't on their own been independently justified. It's motivating the hypothesis, right? God's loving, he wants life, he wants to create DNA or junk DNA. You bake all that into the hypothesis and it seems to get the outcome that you want, but it doesn't seem like it's actually unifying like any phenomena independently. You see what I'm saying? It seems like it's not just like a bare bones theism hypothesis. It has all these extra kind of baked in motivations. And that's where it seems to become just like a just so story to me, or just somebody telling me something that has a bunch baked into it already, which you can get the outcome that you want.
Right. No, you can. Somebody like Stephen Meyer, like he has a PhD from either Oxford or Cambridge in the philosophy of science. Like he's very steeped in the scientific method. He's very careful. Like he's not somebody who like, he's not going to put any assumptions into these hypotheses. Like he's very bare bones in how he goes about it. And he works for the Discovery Institute and their intelligent.
Man, no.
Yeah, we know who they are. Yeah.
Are you familiar?
And unfortunately,
oh God, yeah. There's
really
good. I'm not gonna, open. Like, there's a lot of good stuff you can look on the tubes on the internet of people actually just completely demolishing and destroying the Discovery. Is it the Discovery Institute? I always want to say the Discover Institute.
Yeah,
Discover Institute. Yeah, and
it's not hard.
It's not hard, but there's long videos that will go over each individual person. I think James Tour or whoever is a part of that. But I do have to cut this short because I want to get to callers. I'm trying to be better as a host and get to as many callers as I can. That might be a fault of me. So, just Jmike, remind me in the comments. Just tell me, hey, go through callers quick because this is a fault I have. But Mark, I do want to give you like a last word before we move on. But I do want to try to get to these other callers.
Yeah. No, fair enough. There is an ongoing debate going on right now, like on the YouTube sphere between James Tour, Dr. Tour, who doesn't take that line. He's not an intelligent designer. Like, he thinks eventually we will be able to explain the origin of life through naturalistic process, but he's a theist, and the Discovery Institute kind of uses him as a proxy of sorts because he's extremely well renowned in chemistry, and he's able to sort of poke holes in the origin of life community that really I think they kind of do a disservice because they do such an exaggeration, and somebody like Dr. Tor is able to kind of expose it, and it doesn't make them look good. So this is like obviously an ongoing debate.
I would look at Tor,
fair
because Tor's paper, people write, his colleagues criticize him. Right, this is very clear and open. You can go find colleagues criticizing him on this. That's why I said go look on the tubes. I'm not going to directly promote other channels on the channel, but there are a lot of places that you can go look at this, and the papers, responses, papers that have been responded or that are in response to James Tor. The picture that's painted on this side is just so far from reality, right? It's just so far from reality in terms of how their colleagues are interpreting this. I mean, a lot people have openly expressed that they're concerned on James Tor's knowledge here with it and how he displays it and the types of things he says. But Mark, I do have to go getting to other calls and get to promo, but we do appreciate it. Call in. I'm not on next week, but call in any week. But if you want to talk to me specifically, call on, look ahead and see if I'm on, and I'd be glad to go into more of that stuff. Or Forrest is someone you could definitely call.
Forrest would be a good one. Yeah.
So yeah, because that is definitely not my expertise in the slightest.